the
This
answer.
conference will now be recorded.
There we go.
You bet you, as Father Morgan said.
Sonia, you are the teacher now. We are students.
Yeah, and as you see at the bottom of what St. Paul said, I have transmitted that which I have received. If I can, there we go. And Archbishop Lefebvre, of course, repeated that in his consecration sermon on the 30th of June 1988. But anyway, the subject tonight is amateur radio. So this is just a course to hopefully help you to pass the foundation exam and get the foundation license. It could be very useful for us as traditional Catholics. So as I mentioned before, this is the book. Someone who sent off for that. It's important to make sure it's the new syllabus. This is the old syllabus book. That's the current 2019 syllabus. As a computer engineer specialising in networking, I know that if the internet goes down, all the telecommunications infrastructure will go down and we won't be able to communicate. And fair enough, we can have solar panels and to charge devices, but there's going to be no infrastructure. So my father, I knew of amateur radio because my father was a radio amateur back in the 1970s, 1980s, and my uncle as well. They held B licenses, and of course I had a technical IT background, so I thought I was naturally the best person to pioneer it. But obviously there needs to be other radio amateurs in tradition really other than myself. But if I were to pioneer it, then hopefully I could, help a few other people come along to it. So then in January 2016, I went on a foundation course run by Milton Keynes Amateur Radio Society, and that was actually Mike. It might be one of your relatives who actually taught me it. Someone called Frank Jackson.
Yeah.
He lives in Haversham. M0JSZ is his call sign.
Yeah.
But so then I got my foundation, did my foundation course there. Passed the foundation exam in late March and licensed in April as M6VIT. That's my foundation call sign in April 2016. Then in September, I went on an intermediate course also run by him at his house and passed my intermediate exam in December 2016. I got licensed as 2E0VIT. That's my intermediate call sign. And then in the summer 2017, I began a 6-month distance learning course to do my advanced exam, now called the full license exam. That's based in Bath. BBADL, by the way, stands for Bath-based Advanced Distance Learning. It's run by Steve Hartley, call sign G0FUW. And I passed my advanced exam in Bath on the 13th of December 2017. And I got licensed. I've got my license here actually. Well, I think it's 21st of 21st December 2017 was my got the full license. M0 SPV. Now you can actually choose the last 3 letters of your call sign, provided they haven't been taken already. And in my case, VIT was already taken. Quite a lot of other combinations were ADV, my initials, VAD, IMT, my confirmation initials for Joseph Marie Therese. And so in the end, I chose SPV after St. Pius V. SPX is, by the way, also taken. If any of you want that call sign, M0 SPX is taken already. But now I became an RSGB registered assessor in the summer 2018 so that I can assess practicals for other people to get their foundation and intermediate exams. And I'm currently the exam secretary of Dunstable Downs Radio Club in Dunstable, where I'm also involved with training, but as well as that, I'm the exam secretary for that club. So amateur radio, we'll talk a bit about what it's not first, so to speak, a bit about what it is, but also what it's not. So firstly, it's not, a lot of people when they hear the word amateur radio, they think like radio DJ, like broadcasting. It's not that. It's not broadcast for general reception, and in fact playing music's not prohibited by in licensed conditions for amateur radio. the only type of broadcast that is permitted is called a CQ call, which is when you basically say, is anyone else out there? And we'll talk about a CQ call later in the syllabus. It's non-commercial in nature, so you can't use it to run a taxi service or to run a pizza delivery service or anything to do with business. Or if you're a private security firm, something like that, you can't use it for that. I mean, if you're doing a charity event like Lions Fun Run or something, then yeah, you can use it for that. That's non-commercial, so that's okay. It's similar in many ways to CB and PMR radio, and I'm going to talk next a bit about CB and PMR briefly. Is that from Mike? I've got a message up on my screen.
What was that, Antonio?
I've got a message. You may be experiencing network communication difficulties. To improve audio performance, close any unused internet applications or switch to the telephone.
You come through okay here. Just carry on. I'll let you know if you come in garbled or anything.
You could close the webcam off and just have my screen maybe, but I mean, if I'm happy to have the webcam here, but if that would help at all, probably the screen is probably the most important.
Yeah.
thing.
Okay. We'll turn our videos off then. Is that what you're saying, Antonio?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the important thing is to have my screen shared and have the voice, and then
Yes. Okay, no problem.
We turn off our video. I mean,
Yes, please.
yeah, okay.
all of us turn off our videos, yeah.
Okay, how do I do that? Oh, there.
Turn mine off as well.
Stop camera sharing. Yes. Is that okay?
Okay, so that's okay. That's right. Fine. So we're saying it's similar in many ways to CB and PMR radio. Amateur radio is. There are some differences, and we're going to talk about that next. It's about the technical experimentation. It's a technical hobby, but technical experimentation doesn't have to be very technical for you guys. It could be simply going around with a handheld like this and seeing, where you get best reception, and it doesn't have to be very technical at all. But also that entirely depends on your skills and your how involved you want to get with it. But it's also educational as well, and it probably go very nicely with homeschooling for children and teenagers, and also like the scouts and the cadets. Many of them have badges like communication badges or amateur radio badges, where you can, if you get a foundation license, you can produce your license to your troop scout lead or whoever, platoon commander, and sometimes get the badges out, in the scouts or the cadets. If you do, if you do it outside of cadets, and often the cadets and the scouts and the guides do actually run programs for their own members sometimes, or they might get local amateur radio societies to come in to run them. So if any of you have got any children who are in the cadets or the scouts or the guides, and they want to do this course and get the license, then they could hit two birds with one stone. Okay, so also, but most importantly for us traditional Catholics, it's useful for emergency and off-grid communication, which is why I got involved with it and why I'm doing this thing now. It's a licensed radio, but it's not expensive to get a license, and it's quite easy actually to get the foundation license. To get the intermediate and the advanced, depending on your background, if you've got a background in electronics or a similar thing, then the intermediate and the advanced can sometimes even be easier, depending on your background and the foundation. But the foundation is very simple. There have been 8-year-olds who are doing it, and I've got in my local club a 10-year-old who's going to be sitting his foundation exam soon. And in the United States, it's called ham radio. So you may hear the term ham radio, amateur radio. It's the same thing. It's just in America they tend to use the word ham radio, which is by the way different to CB. And on radio. Who here remembers CB radio?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Anyone ever used it?
I
Sounds
never actually.
familiar.
Briefly
I
talk
don't
about
remember.
what,
Yes, I've used CB radio years ago.
yeah, in the 80s. I used to use it as well when in the about 96, 97. My I had a friend who lived in the same town as me who was a farmer. His father was a farmer, and my father had some CB radios. We used to talk on CB radio, and when I went on holidays with my family, we often went in two cars, and then we'd use CB radios to communicate. So CB radio, it's got a maximum transmit power of 4 watts on FM. It's 40 or 80 channels on 27 megahertz or 11 meters. So it's only one band, unlike amateur radio where you got many different bands in HF. It's you used to get a bit of abusive language and swearing sometimes on CB. There's not many people on CB anymore, and it's pretty much quiet. But so if there's sort of no one to sort of practice with and talk to in terms of or experiment with, the last, which is the next point, and there's limited national and international propagation because of the current sunspot cycle, and of course being only single bands, then it's going to be like you get nothing for what 5 years, and then you get 5 years, you get sporadic international propagation, and then 5 years you don't, 5 years you do. Who here knows about CB, talking to people in other countries with CB? Who's heard of it?
No.
Yeah, I didn't know it was possible. I thought it was just sort of local distances.
Because what we have is we got the Earth, it generally is, and then above the Earth we have something called the ionosphere, and certain radio waves are reflected back. Certain radio waves are reflected back down to Earth from the ionosphere, and so it can actually bounce. We'll talk about the ionosphere a bit later, but because of the sun, of course, different frequencies are reflected in different ways at different times, and with the higher end of the HF frequencies, then like 27 megahertz, then you get sunspot cycles, and you get like 5 years where you don't get any international propagation, 5 years where you do. So it's anyway. You used to have a license for it, which you bought at the post office, but now it's license free. You never had to like sit an exam, but you had to pay for a license at the post office. That used to many years ago be the same with amateur radio, except of course for amateur radio you had to pass an exam as well. But you don't need to pay anything for either now, unless you send off for an amateur radio license by post. If you do it on the internet, it's free. Or if you're over 75, it's also free if you do it by post. We'll get on to that. So PMR radio now. Who here recognises the photo?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
familiar.
Which father is that? That's not Father Clifton, is it? No.
No, Father Holden.
Father Holden. Oh yeah. I'm on a small laptop, so I can't tell.
I've got just my phone.
That's the Rochester County pilgrimage. I think that's a 2009 pilgrimage. That's one I couldn't come on, but I'd only just heard about the SPX because I was doing an intensive driving course up in Blackpool on the day that started, so I couldn't come on that unfortunately. But that's a picture I got off the internet of the pilgrimage. So PMR radio is used on the Rochester Canterbury pilgrimage. So PMR radio, first, it's often confused with CB radio because it's license free and you just buy them from Argus or wherever. It's maximum transport power of half a watt effective radiation power, so 0.5 watts, and so it's not very much power at all. It's handheld only with fixed antenna. The specifications for the license-free PMR radio say it has to be like maximum transport power of half a watt ERP, and you have to have a fixed antenna on it. So things like this, you've got removable antennas, you can unscrew them. That's you can't use them, but technical band, so it's approximately 446 megahertz, which is just above the 70 centimeters amateur band. And you can actually, if you get a Beofig UE5R, which I'm going to talk about later, amateur handheld transceiver you pay 25 quid for, you can actually receive PMR on them. And technically you can transmit, but it would be illegal to, because the transmit power those are 5 watts and 1 watt. Even if you put it on 1 watt, it's still twice the maximum transmit power, and it's got removable antenna. So, but yes, I mean, it is just above the 70 centimeters amateur band, except you've got the restrictions. So it's like half a watt ERP, handheld only. And so that means you've got a limited range of how high you can communicate. It's simplex only, so you can't go through a repeater. And then I'll be talking about what a repeater is later on. There's no national and international propagation. And at that frequency, you know, it would just go straight through the ionosphere. So it's used on the Russia's Canterbury pilgrimage. In fact, not last year, but I think it's 2018 pilgrimage, I went along pilgrimage and my sandal strap broke, so I got a lift into Canterbury, had to wait a few hours in Canterbury for the rest of the pilgrimage to join me, and I went into it's Casper's ice cream bar in Canterbury when I was waiting, and I didn't want to miss them, so what I did is I knew what the frequency for the PMR channel was that the pilgrimage were using. I brought my amateur radio handheld with me, turned it on inside there, and when they got closer, I was in the ice cream parlour, and I could actually pick up the static getting through. And I went outside, and by coincidence, I met with them there, but Joe Bevan, and then some Mormons came along as well, and we had a bit of a conversation about the faith and you know what, and then the guy Franciscan came along, and we had a really interesting conversation with these two Mormon missionaries. And as the pilgrimage was getting closer, I was picking up through the radio. I could actually hear the conversations on the radio, from the pilgrimage radio. The pilgrimage came in, and then we processed down to the Canterbury Cathedral as normal. So it can be quite useful, actually. Yeah, if you get one of handheld transceivers. It's often mismarketed by manufacturers as to the range. If you see PMR radios, they're often advertised as up to 5K, up to 8K, up to 12K kilometers. Now, that is often mismarketing because it all depends on, you know, actually what the conditions are, what you got in the way in terms of buildings, is it clear line of sight, and that, you know, specific number is normally assuming that it is clear line of sight, which it is not. And half of what ERP you can't really do much. But so amateur radio now. So PMR radio, as I said, is half a watt ERP. CB is 4 watts. With a foundation license on amateur radio, you can transmit up to 10 watts. Now, if you go on to do an intermediate or a full license, you can then transmit 50 or 100 watts respectively. So it's you know, straight away amateur radio, 20 times PMR, 2.5 times 2.5 times CB, just for the foundation license.
So does that device that you said it can transmit from half a watt up to 10 and then even more? Is that device there capable of multiple wattages, or are they a fixed output in terms of wattages? You just have to buy a larger device.
Okay, well, this device here, I mean, this is what we call a mobile device. You might have your car or at home as a base station.
Yeah.
But that one there, that's actually a multi-band. That's actually HF, VHF, UHF. That is an expensive transceiver. That's like about 500 quid. But you don't have to get something like that. I mean, that will do single sideband. That will do FM, do AM. It will do. That is a. But yes, I mean, with the different transceivers have different options on them. how much they'll transmit and what the power options you get are. I mean, with some transceivers such as the FT450, you can specify normally in multiples of 1 watt how much you want to transmit all the way up to 100 watts.
Right. Okay.
And so if you say got a foundation license and you got a 450D, you could then transmit 10 watts while you got your foundation license if you wanted to. You could transmit something like 9 or 7 if you really want to, and you could then, when you get your intermediate, push it up to 50 watts, and your full license push up to full power if you wanted to. So to answer your question, it does depend on the transceiver you're buying, the radio you're buying, but there are tons of different types of radios you can buy.
Thanks.
So so your foundation license, you get 10 watts of transmit power. You get multiple bands, so you get medium frequency, HF, which is where you get international propagation and via the ionosphere, VHF, which is and UHF, which are basically the frequencies used of repeaters. Whereas, you know, if you get CB, it's like one frequency, or well, one band, and PMR likewise is one band. You get multiple bands of this in different areas of the RF spectrum with different properties. You get removable antennas are permitted as well, so you could take antennas off, put them on, change antennas about. You're not fixed with like PMR specification, which says it has to be a fixed antenna. There is not limited to handhelds. As I said, this here is a mobile transceiver. You can have handhelds, but you can also have mobile transceivers. You can have base stations at home. You can have whatever you like. You can use repeaters to make local and inter-county communication. We're going to talk about repeaters a bit later. And there is a wide range of options for medium and long distance communication, including multiple HF bands. As I said, the ionosphere has different properties at different times of day. It will reflect different frequencies differently, but in amateur radio, we got a variety of different frequencies we can use, so we can work with that. You also have the option to use amateur radio satellites, which do exist for long distance communication. Or you also have moon bounce, or EME, which is where you bounce signals off the moon as if you use the moon as a satellite. And of course repeaters as well, which are by far the most common type of long propagation, most common type of tool we can actually use to propagate signals with the 25-pound transceivers, which I'm going to be recommending that you go for the first transceiver. So this is a transceiver I was recommending. I'm going to turn my mic back on now, I think, actually, because okay, so I'm going to show you some of mine now. So I'm going to turn my webcam. I'm going to turn my webcam back on. All right, it's always on. Right, so I can turn my. Okay, so go back to the slide. Okay, so the Bofed UV5R, I've got one here. It's between 20 or 30 pound brand new, depending on where you buy it from. So it's about the same price as PMR. In fact, I have several, and I've even got one still in the box actually. This one I actually bought for my uncle, but he's already got one. But so it's that's VHF and UHF. So it will do 2 amateur radio bands. It will do 2 meters and 70 centimeters, and it could also receive PMR, as I mentioned previously, and it could actually transmit on PMR, but it would be illegal to in the UK. But and it could also receive broadcast FM. You get 5 watts of transmit power with 1 watt low power options. So by default, it transmits at 5 watts on high power, but you can set its transmit at 1 watt if you wanted to, and you might say battery life. But it's good for simplex and working repeaters. So simplex is where you transmit radio to radio, and repeaters I'm going to talk about later. It also has a built-in torch and flashlight. If I see that, I've got a torch on there as well. Torch and flashlight. You see, it does get the broadcast radio on there as well. You can listen to it. I don't think we want pop music.
No thanks.
But you know, you get news on there, and of course the local repeaters. I might just call into local repeater. M0 SPV. That's a Tring amateur radio repeater there. I don't think there's anyone on at the moment, but just thought I'd show you that. And it's also got removable antenna. Now, when you buy them, you will normally have they'll come with an antenna like this, which is a normal one. Some radio amateurs say that you should throw this one away, this antenna that you get with it, because it's not very good. I don't go that far, so they keep hold of it, but you can for not very much money. This I paid £4.50 for brand new. Get a better antenna, which you can screw onto it and use it like that.
Looks like police radio.
Yeah, well, my father's a retired police officer. He's a radio amateur long before he became a police officer, though. But yeah, all kinds of accessories you get for them. Funny to say about police, because you can get these for them as well. Which I did, and plug into the radio. Like, hello there. Get all sorts of accessories for these. And also, yes?
I was going to just ask, what is the battery life on that radio for when it's fully charged? How much would you get?
Well, it depends whether you transmit on 5 watts or 1 watt. I normally transmit on 5 watts, and I've had, I don't time it, but I'd say you get a few hours out of them. And of course, the batteries, you can take them off, and they're removable. They're not, they're like, yeah, they're Li-ion batteries, and you can also get bigger battery packs for them, and you can get things that allow you to use AA batteries for them, or you get several radios and just, you know, swap the batteries around, and you know, get them in camouflage colours, and you know, get them in colours like red, blue, others, yeah, whatever, different colours. Also, you can get an adapter like this. It goes SMA here to SO239. If you get one of these adapters, what you can then do is you can then plug them to just about any antenna you like, and you get, so see, that's the adapter, and that's what you get. If you ever use CB, you might recognise that SO239 plug, and that's a PL259. Those are used also in amateur radios, and then I could put that into a really massive antenna if I wanted to, and I have done that sometimes. But and to prove that they're not that much, £21 off eBay. If you go somewhere like Moonraker, you'll probably pay about £30. If you go to eBay, you'll pay like £21. But It comes in a nice box, and it's a nice Christmas present, so to speak. But if you want to, there's nothing stopping you buying one already, and you won't be able to transmit until you get licensed. But you can buy one just to listen to the repeaters on it, to listen to PMR, public radio, and talks as well. And then when you get a license, you could use it then to transmit. And here are some antenna options we have, which you could do with it. So we've got let's say that's the adapter I used there, and that's what you get more or less in the kit. Now some of them come with USB chargers with it. I mean the one I got here, the charge for this one is USB. More often now they're coming with USB chargers that plug into USB, which I actually prefer. It might be worth when you look at them on eBay seeing what sort of charger it comes with, because one with a foreign plug on is a bit inconvenient. One with the UK plug on, I'd say is okay. Personally, I'd rather go for USB chargers because then I've got more variety of things I can plug them into. I can plug this more easily into the car. I can plug it into, I can plug it into a solar panel, think 12-volt thing. I can plug it into. Whereas, if it's like if it's like a physical, mains pod charger, then I've got to convert it up to maybe 240 in order to then convert it down again. It's wasting energy, but yeah, it's worth checking out if you buy one what charger they come with. They are interchangeable, so.
Can you use those abroad?
Sorry.
Can you use those when you go abroad?
You can, yes. The only thing is that to use them to use your as a radio amateur, foundation and intermediate licenses are not routinely recognised abroad. Full licenses are. I mean, if you had a license in the other country as well, then you could. And we'll talk about that when we look at licensing conditions about going abroad and operating abroad. So we've got the that's the adapter there you could use. This here, it's like a mobile mag mount for a car. So you put that in your car and then have your radio in your car and have some sort of hands-free, and you could use your radio in the car. I've already talked about this one. Now I've actually got a student of mine at the college where I work at. He's actually got one of these bow things, and he didn't get it because of me. He told me already he had it, and he hasn't got a license, but he just listens on it. And he's got he got one of these. I think they're called a Bree or something, and they're really long, but they're so long it's practically a joke. But yeah. And then what I have outside is this is called a white stick. Mine's not quite 130 centimeters, but you can put one of these on top of a big pole. I've got like a 20-foot pole I put it on top of, and that's what I use as my main antenna at home. Now down here we got this here is called a Yagi, and that's a unidirectional antenna. So you focus your radiation power in one direction, you receive in one direction. Whereas what we got here is all the other antennas here, like omnidirectional antennas, which receive in all directions. Of course, a bit of Latin there is trads, that's common sense, but and you don't have to pay a lot of money for antennas. You can make them yourself. Here we got someone who's made a Yagi out of see what he's made. He's made it out of steel tape measure and a plastic pipe, it looks like. And then again, he's got one of those adapters. He's plugged it into a bow thing down there. So yeah, you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can make your own antennas. Now, if you do make your own, you have to worry about SWR, which I'm going to talk about later in the course because it forms part of the syllabus. But yeah, so that's some antenna options you do have if you don't want to use the normal and just the standard antenna on your radio. There are options you do have for antennas. So propagation options for amateur radio. So repeaters. I never get to repeaters. So does anyone want to guess what a repeater does?
Release the signal onwards.
Sorry?
Takes the signal and then relays it onwards.
Correct, yes. So what a repeater will do is it normally somewhere up high, like the top of a hill, and it will receive on one frequency on the amateur band, and it will peak it on another frequency. And it's on the same band, but it's double frequency. So on the 70 centimeter band, it's normally plus 1.6 megahertz. And on the 2 meters, it's normally minus 0.6 megahertz. That's basically what it does. And of course, that's basically how a repeater works. Now, using repeaters, you can sometimes talk quite long distances. I mean, I've gone this thing up to the top of the multi-storey car park in Leighton Buzzard, where I live in Bedfordshire, and I've been able to get to the Amersham repeater, GB3AL, the call sign of the Amersham repeater. And through the Amersham repeater, I've been able to talk to people in South London, in Brixton and in Croydon. So repeaters, you can get some serious distance. I've also through the Breel repeater, the VA repeater. Breel is located in Buckinghamshire near the border with Oxfordshire. I've been able to talk to from Leighton Buzzard to someone in the city of Oxford.
Wow.
And I think that's impressive. Now with the internet, albeit if the internet goes down, then we're not going to be able to use that to our advantage. But with the internet, you can actually link one repeater to the other. As you see, we got here an internet link, and so it could be a repeater in different countries, even it could be a repeater anywhere. Now, funnily enough, the day after I passed my advanced exam in Bath, I was in my hotel when I went to the local Bath repeater, and that was linked in with a Newbury. I think it's a Newbury repeater. And I think I was talking to someone locally in Newbury who was taking their dog for a walk or something. And that was the day after I passed my advanced exam, but I still had to operate as 2E0 VIT because it took about 8 days for my call sign to come through after I passed my exam. But that's not unusual. You have to wait a week or two for things the results to come through. Because after you pass your exam, it has to then be recorded with the RSGB has to process it and record it with Ofcom, and then you can apply for your license online, or you can send off for it by post.
Oh dear. No.
But in the old days, you used to have to wait. In the days of the RAE, the regular amateur exam, back when my father got licensed, you had to sit your exam on paper. You had to wait months and months for the results to get back to you. And then you had to then send off by post again for your license. Then you wait another month to actually get your license. So back then it took completely months to, and there was a big unknown gap of a few months before you even knew if you passed. And then maybe another month before you got your license. Whereas nowadays, you know if you pass straight away the online exams, and well, in fact, even if you do it on paper, as long as you don't do the advanced on paper, you know if you pass and you fail straight away, and then it's maybe a week or two to wait, maybe 3 weeks even if you're unlucky to get your license. So it's quite reduced to what waiting time we have today, what it used to be in the 1970s, 1980s. So HF and ionosphere, I've already talked about this before, but the ionosphere, it'll reflect radio waves and it'll bounce back down to Earth, and different frequencies at different times of day, and depends on the sunspot cycle. As I said, the CB band doesn't transmit CB, Sorry, no, it does. Sorry, the CB band doesn't. The ionosphere does not reflect CB and during the sunspot cycles. And that's also true of the higher amateur bands, like the 10-meter band. So, for example, you might have the 40-meter band, 7 megahertz. Throughout the daytime, you get Europe on that band, and then at night time, you could get to America on it, for example. Whereas you might have the 80-meter band, which is 3.5 megahertz, and you might get generally locally UK during the day, and then at night time you might get Europe, like Italy and that sort of stuff, and you got quite a few different frequencies. HF, by the way, is between 3 and 30 megahertz, and you see here we got HF. You do have ground wave, but you also have the so you got, like here you got the transmitter, and then you get what we call the ground wave, which goes there, and then we get the skip zone, and then you got the first thing that's been reflected. Then you got another ground wave, and of course it's reflected. So using that method, I mean, here we got the example we got here is San Francisco here and New York over here. Now, obviously, America is a big country, so it's quite some distance apart. But you can actually get around the world with that. You can get to America on it. You can get to Italy. You can receive quite well on 40 meters, and they tend to use a lot of power. The Italians do, transmit power. So you can get around the world with HF, and if you listen to medium wave or long wave, it's quite common to receive other countries, and that's also because the ionosphere reflects radio waves in that way. So we also have satellites as well. Amateurs have launched various satellites, which we could use for communication. I think there's about 100 or so satellites up there we could use. And here we see Yargis be used to get satellites. I haven't worked satellites myself, but it is a possibility. And you can get, of course, international propagation with that quite easily. Because when I say quite easy, I've not done it myself, but there's so much in amateur radio that if you did everything, you wouldn't have time to do everything. But that is a possibility to do long distance communication, and it's probably a lot easier than doing moon bounce or EME, which needs a lot of power. So moon bounce. Now, when I first Googled moon bounce, this is what came up: bouncy castles. So nothing to do with that, but yeah, you use Yargis here to, as often, and you use a lot of power. In fact, probably a foundation license if you want to do moon bounce. You can receive, but you tend to use a lot of power. You're limited to 10 watts, but if you get an intermediate or full license, then that's going to be more of a possibility. And it does actually link with astronomy here, amateur radio, but I've not done it myself either. My father apparently has some time ago back in the day. He told me he used it. I've actually still got my father's transceiver here. This is actually older than me. This is about 40 or 50 years old. It's a 2-meter transceiver, and it's got two settings: high power and low power. Low power is 1 watt, high power is 10 watt.
How old are you?
I'm 31.
Oh my God. Relatively antique.
But yeah, my father had to. You could operate this on high power 10 watts with a foundation license, and the exam my father had to get to even operate this back in 1970s, 1980s. You'd laugh how complex it was back then, how hard it was. It's like the equivalent of the advanced today, just to do this. But yeah, But my father has, using this, actually told me that he has actually reflected the signal off the moon on 10 watts and received it back a few seconds later. But with moon bounce, you can actually talk to other people, because they can actually use the moon as a satellite. You can actually talk to other amateurs through it.
Antonio, does the weather and geoengineering, when all the spraying, does that affect the reception and stuff?
Sorry, you're very quiet. I can't quite hear you. Sorry, could you repeat your question, please?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can. You're very quiet.
All right. Okay. My setup's not very good here, but does the weather, like clouds, affect it, and geoengineering?
I don't know too much about it, but from what I know, it would affect it, yes. And I mean, the moon is not something which is designed to be a satellite, so to speak. It's a load of rock, really. So that's why a lot of people who do moon bounce, they use high power. In fact, a lot of amateurs apply for what's called a notice of variation from Ofcom, which is what you have to notice of variation. If you have a full license, it's basically like an indult, so to speak. You can apply to Ofcom for permission to do something which would normally be not be allowed, and it might be to use more power. So you might get a full license holder normally would be limited to 400 watts, but you might get a notice of variation, an indult, so to speak, to allow you to use 1,000 watts or a kilowatt, which people have done and they've granted it. Now, when they do it, obviously Ofcom you have to say why you need it, and you need to sort of say how you're going to prevent any possible interference, etc. And Ofcom might put some restrictions in, like only these certain frequencies or only certain times, or or about what antenna you're using. But yeah, I would imagine. I imagine it would be affected by the moon bounce, would be affected by the clouds and stuff like that. I mean, if you want to know more, I could probably got some people I could ask maybe about that.
Yeah, it'd be good to know. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, when you do if you're ever interested in the intermediate or the foundation, possibly covered in there, but I mean, I will find, if you really want to know, I will find the answer out for you. I'll ask a few people and I'll find out for you. Yeah.
The main thing was really is when you're using your equipment there, is it affected on cloudy days or raining days?
It can be, yes, and even with when you're not doing moon bounce, it can be. In fact, there's something called a troponosphere, which also acts as a duct. It's below the ionosphere. It's not covered on the foundation syllabus, but like, for example, between Dover and Calais across the English Channel, it can sort of get ducted radio waves. And I mean, I'm a long way from the sea, but I have actually had it recently in a couple of weeks. I heard all sorts of repeaters which I don't normally hear, and I've been able to get. For example, I heard a Hemel Hempstead repeater which I don't normally get, and interesting enough, on the Hemel Hempstead repeater, there are a couple of people who are in Kent working Hemel Hempstead. So that was really amazing, and they're speaking to people in Watford, which was I couldn't actually get out because I only had 5 watts then, so I was using my Vodafone plugged into a antenna. I have got something here, the SOFT 8500. I've just got to reset the settings on there, but if I had more power, I might have been able to even get into the repeater there. But yes, it does affect it, and in certain circumstances it could be advantageous, and sometimes bad weather is actually advantageous, albeit the other week it was actually good sunny weather, and but yes, so the weather can affect signals, yes. And I mean, one of the biggest things you may know about satellite that can be affected by ice and storms, and and that's UHF, by the way.
Right. Okay.
Right, so here we go. We've got a diagram how moon bounce basically works. Basically, a bit like a satellite. There, of course, you have to use quite a lot of power to often use moon bounce. International Space Station, they do actually have amateur radio. We can't really use that as a repeater. That's very busy. It's but they do have amateur radio up there, and often like schools and various youth groups will talk to the International Space Station. Individual amateurs can also work then, but it's more for sort of a hobby thing and talk to the International Space Station. You can't really get them to pass your message. Now on the right here, what we got here is that's called a QSL card. Now QSL cards, it's not just an International Space Station. If you have a QSO, a conversation on the air with an amateur, a lot of amateurs do like competitions and they collect QSL cards, or they just it basically confirms that a conversation took place on the air at what time and frequency and what day. It's quite common to get one from International Space Station if you work there. And International Space Station, it's got 3 call signs. This one is NA1SS. That's what NASA's call sign on the International Space Station. You see there, it's the NA1SS. I think that's a Russian one, and that must be a Japanese one, I'm guessing. But yeah, there are videos on YouTube of amateurs talking to the International Space Station. I haven't actually worked in myself, but I might work in one day.
Mm-hmm.
Now the frequencies, as I said about the HF, and if we go from so this here is a HF. Sorry, my writing on tab's not very good. It's getting better. So CB is one frequency, 27 megahertz, which is just below that. PMR is just above that. In amateur radio, we got more of a range of frequencies. So regarding international propagation of the ionosphere, you know, depending on time of day, we've got multiple options we can do. Foundation license, you've got 10 watts. If you go for the intermediate or full license, you've got even more. Especially if you're a full license holder, you get an indult, which an OV they call, not indults. I like to think of them as indults because that's the easy trad way to think of it. And I don't know what reason you'd want to use HF on such a high power, but you know, unless you're testing antennas or whatever. But and then we got here the sort of PMR. We got 2 meters, and in fact, this band here is the 6 meter band. That's technically VHF, but that's often called magic band because sometimes you get sporadic E, and when you get sporadic E propagation, then you sometimes, very occasionally, you know, this band will reflect the ionosphere, and you get deducting as well. And I mean, I got ducked in the other day on a week on like 2 meters there, which is 144 to 146, and I think I've got a bit on UHF as well on 70 centimeters. Now, I talk about these bands in terms of meters and centimeters. Who here has heard of wavelength? Okay, so wavelength, it's there's a relationship between frequency and wavelength, and as frequency increases, wavelength decreases. And there is a formula to calculate it. You don't need to know the formula for the foundation. You'll be given a graph between frequency and wavelength in the exam, which you might need for any questions there. But so 3.5 to 3.8, that is 80 meters. That is 40 meters. There we go. Don't put one thing, is 40 meters. That is 30 meters. 20 meters. Could go on to give them more. That's 15, and that's 10 meters. But you see, where is the relationship here between 40 and 80 meters? You see, so 80 meters, the wavelength has halved, but the frequency has effectively doubled. Do you see how it works? The relationship between frequency and wavelength. We'll talk about that in more detail in future weeks when we actually do the stuff for the exam. This is just an introduction to amateur radio this week. But so now, why is amateur radio licensed? Well, firstly, with amateur radio, as I said, you're allowed privileges that other users are not. So there is therefore a need to demonstrate an appropriate level of competence. Now, that includes when you get to the intermediate level and the full level, the ability to use your own transmitting equipment. A lot of like the PMR radios you get in the shop, they have to conform to EC regulations. Now, amateur equipment doesn't have to. For the foundation license, you are limited you're limited to commercially built kits. But I mean, this, for example, wouldn't comply to EC regulations, but it would be commercially constructed kit, so you could use that on the foundation. But when you get to intermediate, you can actually build your own transmitting equipment. Of course, even foundation, you're allowed to higher power. You're allowed to use 10 watts, which is 20 times the PMR power you're allowed. You're allowed to do various. So you have to show confidence that you're not going to cause interference. And there's other radio users. So we got the police, ambulance, fire brigade. You've got home users like use Wi-Fi, and you've got the mobile users, and there's additionally also, more importantly, air traffic control as well, if they could communicate that. So there's a need to show competence there, and that's why we have it. It also allows, if there's inadvertently any interference, allows it to be identified and rectified, and where appropriate regulated. Now, in most cases, now with the foundation license, if you use one of these fail things, you're not going to cause much interference. And if without one, you can't really, using 10 watts, you can't really cause much interference. But even if you use something else, basically there to give you a bit, just an entry level, like provisional license, so to speak, in a way. But I mean, you can have one as long as you like. It's like motorbikes. People take, get a provisional license, take a CBT, a compulsory basic training, and ride a motorbike on L plates for 2 years. Except you don't have to renew your CBT. It's valid for life, your foundation license. So even if you just don't want to do anything else after foundation license, apart from on the local repeaters, that's all you need is a foundation license. It also allows your station to be identified on air. So my call sign M0FB. You know who I am, and I've got identification to use on there. And now I'm going to talk a bit about the history of amateur radio licensing. Now, it's not exam material, but go back to the distant past. Here, that's the license my father holds, and my uncle as well, Class B license. Back then, to get the Class B license, you had like 2 exams. One was called we had City Girls RAE. One was like an exam on electronics, and the other one was the license conditions. And they're both the same level, on par with the advanced exam is today, or the full license exam. And you had to sit them. And when you sat them, you only had access to 2 meters above, so you couldn't use HF for the international communication. So to use HF, you had to get Class A. In Class A, you had to do Class B. You had to do the license. You had to do the same exams for Class B. You didn't have to get a Class B license to have Class A license, but you had to do the same exams. Plus, you had to do Morse code.
Oh,
You had to do Morse code at 12 words per minute. You can get access to HF. And you think about it, my father going on this old radio here, he had to do all that Class B license exam, all those big technical exams just to use this back in the day. And you could use 10 watts on if you wanted to use 5 or 10 watts on HF, you just had to do all that and do the Morse as well back in the day, back a long time ago. And then the more recent past, then Class A, Class B license. They still had that, but they then brought in a Class A stroke B. I'm not sure what it was. I think you got access to some of the HF bands or something. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but if you sat the 5 words a minute test, you get the Class A stroke B, where you just more set a slow speed of 5 words a minute. And they brought in a novice license as well, which then became the intermediate license, which was a simpler, so you didn't have to learn so much about electronics and that sort of stuff. And then they then brought into basically the 3 levels, but they still had Class A and Class B distinctions. So they brought foundation, novice became A and B, and the intermediate B was novice became intermediate. So the intermediate B was no Morse back then, and the intermediate A for the novice license was actually 5 words a minute. And then you got full B, which was like full license with no Morse. Full A stroke B was 5 words a minute, and full A was full license with 12 words a minute. And then in 2003, the World Radio Conference, they completely abolished the need for Morse code. And so then the A and B things were no more. Then we just got the 3 different levels which we have today, and foundation, intermediate, and full. And what that effectively means, for example, my father, now who never did Morse, can now go on HF if he wanted to, and use. And likewise, on myself, I didn't have to learn Morse. Now, when I did my foundation practicals, I did do a Morse appreciation, but I was not required to learn Morse. It was just have a go. That's all you were required to do for the practicals. Now, in your case, you won't do any practicals because the RFGB have suspended them because of COVID-19. But what I might do is I might repeat some of the practicals and film them, or provide a YouTube resource so that you can appreciate them if need be for the purposes of the exam, in case you might get a question like it. But I'll address that when we go into the syllabus as appropriate. And I'll say now call signs. Now in England here, foundation call signs will begin with M3, M6, or M7. When you get your licenses, you'll be M7s because all the M3s and the M6s are used up, and you're allowed 10 watts maximum power. I was an M6 when I did mine. Intermediates used 2E0 and 2E1, and the reason why we had 2E0, 2E1. Anybody want to guess this?
No, I'm gonna clue.
Okay, this is not this. Okay, the reason was because back in the day when we had intermediate A, intermediate B, 2E0 used to be the intermediate A with the 5 words a minute, and that Morse, and that used to do without any Morse at all. But of course they've abolished that now, and the current issue is 2E0 for everyone. And then you've got the full license, which were G followed by a number 0 to 8. So for example, my father's call sign, or one of my instructors for my advanced distance learning was G0FUW. Another sign here I remember is this one. They had anything beginning for G is a full license, M0 is a full license, and before 2003, M0 was, full license with Morse at 12 words a minute, like Class A. M1 was no Morse, and M5 was Morse at 5 words a minute. And the maximum transmit power for full license holders is 400 watts. Now, there are some regional identifications in here which we'll cover later when we do licensing conditions for the purpose of the exam. That's basically the prefixes for this country. Other countries do have other call signs as well, but you don't need to know them for the foundation license. You just need to focus on the UK. Now, the practicals are currently suspended. I'm just going to turn the lights on, actually. Okay, so what would normally happen is if you were doing a course to get your foundation license, often you do it for a local amateur radio society because you need practicals, and you would complete these practicals and you'd get a registered assessor such as myself to sign them off. Looks like 7 here, but you actually normally do 6. So for the first 2, it's either the Morse appreciation, or you can send and receive a data mode using the radio. Now in practice at my club, we still do the Morse appreciation, but the new syllabus in 2019, they made it optional to do the to do a digital mode of the radio instead of the Morse appreciation. There's an on-air practical using single sideband at SSB, and we'll talk about what single sideband is in later sessions, and one in FM. We would also physically adjust the length of an antenna for optimal SWR, standard wave ratio, which is basically tuning an antenna. And you'd also use a manual antenna tuning unit to do the same thing. And you'd also correctly connect up the stations. So, for example, here, you would connect up the radio, and you would connect up things like the SWR meter and the antenna tuning unit, the antenna, and the power supply for it. Of course, that's all been suspended for the time being, so that normally you would be required to do this before you can sit your exam, but the RSGB, the awarding body, have actually temporarily suspended the practicals because of COVID-19, so it's just an exam. And there are also practicals for intermediate as well, but we're just doing foundation here. For the advanced or the full license, there is no practicals. It's just an exam for the advanced, for the full license. And the foundation exam, it's 26 questions, multiple choice. It's A, B, C, or D. When I did it, it was an optical marking sheet. And it's you can still do it by paper, but you can't at the moment because of COVID-19. It's only the only way you can do it at the moment is online, remotely invigilated. But so it's 26 questions, multiple choice, A, B, C, or D, 55 minutes. So you have to get 19 correct answers out of 26 in order to pass. There's no negative marking, so if you don't know an answer, you can select anyone at random, and if you get it wrong, you won't be put down for it. Of course, if you think it's going to be this one or that one, or you can rule out some, then you've got potentially a better chance of getting that question right. It's you do get a reference booklet in the exam which gives you various things. For example, you get the licensing schedule, which you can look at, and you get the graph of frequency and wavelength on, and various other bits and pieces you need, such as band plans, which we'll talk about later sessions. And you're also allowed to bring a calculator into the exam. Now, the requirement normally is it's a silent, non-programmable calculator. Obviously, if it was one that made a sound, it would disturb other candidates taking the exam. But for the purposes of this, of course, all the exams are going to be done online. So even if it's not silent, I mean most are, but if you've got like a talking calculator, that should be okay. But what you can't use it, you can't have programmable calculators. So if you can like program a form into it before then you or formula into it before the exam, you can't have that. It's basically the same rules as for GCSE mathematics. And you're allowed scientific calculators if you want to be scientific, but the stuff we're doing, you're not going to need scientific. But I mean, if you've got a scientific calculator anyway, that you could just use it if you want to. In fact, the foundation stuff, you might not even want a calculator because it's so simple, but it doesn't hurt to bring one along. Sorry.
Okay.
I mean, the most complex thing we're going to have is things like maybe Ohm's law. You might have to divide 20 by 5 or something like that. You know, so it's you know, it's really up to you whether you want a calculator or not. But you're also allowed to bring in, strangely, a mascot to the exam, a packet of sweets, and a drink. It's actually funny because I remember when I did my advanced exam, I did my advanced exam in Bath, and I got off the. I was rushing to get there, and I brought a sandwich with me, and my instructor said to me, he joked to me, "Oh, you can't have that because it's not a sweet sandwich." But yeah, I just scoffed it down before the exam and then took the exam. And so the cost of the foundation exam is £27.50. It's payable to the RSGB, Registered Society of Great Britain. You pay them online through the website when you book it. But and the online exam is it's invigilated remotely by webcam. So you have to have a webcam and a microphone. And at the beginning of the exam, what will happen is you'll show your webcam around the room to the invigilator. It's like this. There's nothing. It's and you show your ID, like your passport or driving license, to the invigilator with the webcam. And then when you're satisfied, the exam will begin, and then you do the 55-minute exam. Okay. Any questions on that at all?
Is there any other territories that license would be valid?
Okay, well, for the foundation license, by default, it's not something called CEPT, which Central European something or other. It's not nothing to do with the European Union, by the way, but it's the foundation and intermediate licenses are not recognised in the UK. Are not recognised by CEPT because different countries have different standards for licensing. I mean, full licenses on the CEPT Class 1, and that's recognised throughout Europe and internationally. But I believe German licenses, they have similar like to intermediate and novice licenses, and those licenses are recognised in other territories, so they're not automatically recognised. Now, having said that, you know, other territories could choose to recognise your license voluntarily. I mean, when I was 2E0, I went to France to visit the then brother Bending Marie, Geoffrey Godler, and I asked the French authorities, would my UK intermediate license be okay in France, or my foundation license? Because I had the foundation license as well, the intermediate, and now I've got 3. But and they said no. It's in French. They replied. They said like no, novice licenses are not allowed. They said. Of course, amateur. You see, it's and novice license. It was I think it must be the French word for novice, for amateur, is sort of novice, and it was like no, novice licenses are not permitted. which is actually quite funny, that country. I think Germany though does tend to sort of recognise them, but at the moment intermediate licenses are not not even accredited. But I mean, Gibraltar, I believe, is technically part of the UK, so I think you can use it in Gibraltar, foundation and intermediate licenses in the UK. Although having said that, the other option would be to do a license in that country. But probably the best thing you could do if you're serious about operating in another country is do the foundation do the intermediate, and then do the full license, and then it's recognised globally. Okay, so now I'm going to run this course every Thursday at 8 o'clock, and I want to put you through the syllabus to get the license. Now, in addition to this, there's also some other online resources I am recommending. Now, so the key thing is to get the also to get the book, the new syllabus. So it's this one as opposed to this one, the Foundation License Manual. Now, if you really want to get into radio and think about doing the intermediate or the advanced, then you might want to get the Exam Secrets book as well. Three exams, 2 chapters, all 3 exams by chapter, and we're going to get that. Also, in addition to that, Essex can do a free foundation online course, which is like you log into a portal and then you get material you read and you get quick questions and this sort of stuff. I would recommend you go for you sign up for that. That's free, and of course I'll be supplementing it with this as well. I will try and get people as far as possible to pass the exam. And additionally, if you like YouTube, there's the Cornish Amateur Radio Society, ARS, by the way, stands for Amateur Radio Society. That's something you often come about in amateur radio, the term ARS, Amateur Radio Society. So I used to be a member of Milton Keynes Amateur Radio Society. I used to be a member of that society, but yes, that's the old syllabus, but a lot of information is still relevant there. So I'd recommend if you sign up to Foundation Online and say I will run these courses regularly, and hopefully between us we can get through it. I have actually got someone through the exam with the foundation exam without the Essex hand stuff, but I'm trying to, obviously doing it at distance is more difficult, so I'm trying to do everything I can to increase the chance of getting as many traders possible through the foundation exam and getting you licensed on your local repeaters. And so the homework setting then for next week. Firstly, if you haven't got it already, to get this book, you can get it from the RSGB website, the RSGB shop, or you get it other places like Amazon and eBay, I believe. But if you do get it from Amazon or eBay, make sure it's this one, not this one. This is the old one, Foundation License now. Foundation License Manual for Radio Amateurs is the new syllabus one. And once you've got that, the other thing is to read chapter 3, which is technical basics. If I just technical basics, it's basically for page 3. Basically how you connect up light bulbs, basic circuits, a bit about Ohm's law, V equals IR. That's about as complex as you're going to get in terms of maths. And so if you just page 3 to page 8, but if you can't read all that, don't worry, just read what you can. But that's the homework for tonight. And any questions?
Those links you just had, could you add those to the WhatsApp group? You know, the Essex Ham and yeah, that's fine.
I can do, and also what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the slides also to the WhatsApp group.
Okay.
As a PDF, and if you go into the PDF, you can click on them. But I can just copy and paste as well and include them. I'm not sort of trying to sort of offset, you know, my work, so to speak, by getting you to go onto this course instead of sort of signpost you elsewhere. But I sort of want to increase the chance of passing, and I think, you know, if we combine the methods, we can get you through the exam easier and more effectively.
I ordered a book last week. I haven't got it yet. And also, how long is this course? How many weeks?
Well, I think we said initially 6 weeks. I mean, it's not set in stone. I mean, we can do more, we can do less. I mean, we could do some, if we need, if time's pressing, we could do it more than one session a week. If we said 6 weeks initially, but about 6 weeks. But it's it's not set in stone, and you know how long is the lockdown at the end of the day. So that's the other thing. You know, however long or short it takes. But I mean, I'm here for you. You know.
Thank you.
This is very generous of you.